Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Angelito. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. Thanks for sharing a part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, hearing from South Shore tenants who say they went a month without proper heat. Reverend Otis Moss III joins us to talk about his new book offering advice on practicing spiritual resistance during challenging times. A throwback to the sweet origins of a Black-owned Chicago area business.
I think it's super important to not only work with other creatives of color, but you sort of unionize in a way.
And a new coalition aims to uplift local artists of color in a new partnership at the Wonder Museum.
You know, every finger is its own, canvas.
And we've got 10 reasons you should get to know the Chicago artist setting big trends with tiny masterpieces. All that coming up, but our first story tonight, fears of displacement in the South Shore neighborhood. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
No heat, on and off water, and displacement. That's what residents at Catalyst Realty buildings in South Shore say they've been going through over the past month. Now, some organizers say the situation highlights concerns over possible displacement in housing and affordability by the coming Obama Presidential Center. Now, joining us to talk about this are Alfonso Northington, a tenant at one of the Catalyst Realty apartments, and Dixon Romeo, an organizer with Not Me, We. Now, we also reached out to Catalyst Realty and the Obama Presidential Center, who sent us statements that we'll get to shortly. First, let's just jump right into it. So building records show that allegedly at one of the buildings in early January, there was an inadequate heating, one apartment at 49 degrees, another one at 59, and that one boiler was another boiler was just out of service. Alonzo, tell me, what was this experience like during the winter with the heat being shut off and Catalyst providing a hotel for you all?
Yeah, it was actually very stressful, especially with people trying to go back and forth to work and being able to, because I work from home, so it was very difficult dealing with that. So with the heat being off, I couldn't work. And I'm pretty sure that there were people that have children and people that, are older, and they were getting sick, and it was really terrible. What ended up happening, we started to call 311, and 311 took a very long time to respond to us until we all of a sudden got a knock on the door, and it was the city with the boiler inspector told us that we had to leave that night because our building had been, he explained to me that it was a fire hazard because people were using different ways to heat up their apartments, including their stove, and he said that was a big risk. So, and people were using space heaters as well, and keeping them on, while they were sleeping and things like that. It became very dangerous. So they had to move us to a hotel that night, and we had to hurry up and literally find, clothes and things for us to, or to stay there. All of a sudden, it was I think it was like 5 o'clock at night, 5 p.m. So. And then, so after the hotels, they did move you all into a new apartment complex that's owned by the same company, right? So that's how it was supposed to go. People are still at the hotel right now. As we speak. I was moved first. They called me and they told me that they were going to just give us an apartment that had heat, and I had to accept that, and I also had to pretty much accept whatever they were going to give me, and that's pretty much how that was. Yeah.
So, well, Dixon, let's jump to you. So with your work, so what are you hoping to accomplish in working with tenants such as AJ?
Well, there's a couple pieces, right? So like immediately the tenants have demands that they've come up with around the Catalyst Realty Group giving them adequate units, right? Like giving folks who were displaced because of their inaction to keep the building up to date back into units in the neighborhood they're from and want to stay in. That goes well. Like beyond that, right? Stuff like this happens in South Shore all the time, right? This is a neighborhood that's 77% rental. It's the #1 eviction neighborhood in the city, the #1 eviction neighborhood in the county. The 5th Ward is the #1 eviction ward in Chicago, right? So stuff like this is constantly happening. And with the Obama Center coming into the neighborhood, the center themselves, right, creates a speculative force that allows Catalyst Realty and other folks to look at properties, look at tenants and say, well, maybe if we can cut costs here, we'll be able to maximize profit later because we know new people are coming into the neighborhood to benefit, right? And that's not supposed to be the goal of what's supposed to be happening with this project. And so we're working with these tenants to get their immediate demands met, but also, of course, we have a campaign around getting a holistic housing ordinance in South Shore that can prevent displacement so that Black folks can stay and benefit from the Obama Center.
So we do have a statement that they did send us, that Catalyst sent us, that I will read now. It says in part that we have taken all necessary steps to resolve the issue with the building's boilers, and our team worked quickly to address the problem, and we were able to secure and install a brand new hot water tank within 48 hours. Additionally, we purchased 2 separate boilers to expedite the repair process. Now, Alfonso, would you say, or AJ, would you say that their communication has been what you need as a tenant, needing immediate response?
So I believe the communication has been off for me. I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that the communication and within their team has been off. And also with the boilers, it's more than just the boilers being replaced. There's the apartments that are supposed to be available for us to move into are not ready. They still have mold there. They're still not finished. There's different things that are there that are inhabitable. It's creating an inhabitable space for us to be able to occupy. They're not occupiable, those units.
So they're not really communicating like they should.
Well, I would.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I want to get to this statement from the Obama Foundation that kind of talks about their role in the displacement. And so that statement reads in part, we have applauded the work of the advocates, community, and the city leaders who came together to address the needs of residents who sought to help and keep housing costs affordable. Those efforts came from the shared commitment that people who want to stay in this community should be able to do so. Now, Dixon, how would you say that the center and the city can ensure that housing stays affordable, people aren't displaced, and they're being able to quickly communicate?
Yeah, well, I think the current 5th Ward Alderman, Leslie Harrison, obviously she's retiring. There's a new election. So whoever ends up winning that seat and the mayor, whether it's Lori Lightfoot or anyone else, should prioritize passing a South Shore Housing CBA ordinance immediately. Right? We have a long list of demands, including things like an office and a tenant advocate, including things like rights to return for city code enforcement that would help tenants like AJ and other folks in these buildings, right? Instead of having the whole community have to swarm around folks and do that. We can't do that for 77% of the neighborhood every single day, right? Those are the things that need to happen to make this happen. We've constantly been saying Obama yes, displacement no. The displacement no part means that the city has to pass ordinances and laws that protect things that de-incentivize landlords and other folks from doing things like this that displace tenants in the neighborhood.
Obama yes, displacement no. I hate that we have to end it there, but Dixon Romeo, Alfonso Northington, thank you both so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And up next, advice for practicing spiritual resistance during challenging times. Stay with us. In the days when the bonds that hold the country together can feel so fragile, it can be difficult to see past the worry and anger and work towards justice. In our next Black Voices Book Club selection, Reverend Otis Moss III draws upon stories from his congregation, his forebearers, and his own family, and weaves them into a guide for practicing spiritual resistance in everyday lives. The new book is called Dancing in the Darkness: Spiritual Lessons for Thriving in Turbulent Times. Joining us is the book's author and senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ, Reverend Otis Moss III. So in the book, you say that this title was inspired by your children. Can you tell us a little bit more about where that comes from?
Oh, certainly. So the title, Dancing in the Darkness, really comes from my daughter. It was in 2008, and at our church, we had a gentleman by the name of Senator Barack Obama who was running for president. And as a result of that, there were some attacks on the congregation and my predecessor, Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. And as a matter of fact, I remember I was working out at Bally's, I think it's owned by LA Fitness now, and I was warming down, and someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, is that your church up there? I look up on the screen, and there is a conservative commentator just going off about the church. And so I said, it's time for me to leave at this moment. And that started what was known as we call it the media gauntlet. 40 outlets every single Sunday showed up to Trinity trying to get a quote. And then we had death threats. Myself, Dr. Wright, the church, bomb-sniffing dogs every single Sunday to make sure it was safe. And so I had to get security. We had security at the church. My predecessor had to get security, Dr. Wright. And one evening, we heard something in the house. And my wife tapped me and said, you need to check that out. So I grabbed my rod and my staff, that comforts me, being a Louisville slugger, and looked around the house. And I heard the noise again coming from my daughter's bedroom. And I'm thinking, did someone, break into our home? Was I going to have to defend my children and my wife? And I come into my daughter's room, and there she is in the middle of the room, and she's dancing. And she's saying, look, Daddy, I'm dancing. It's 3 a.m., so I get that fatherly voice, baby, you need to go to bed. But then the Spirit just rested on me and said, look at your daughter. She's dancing in the darkness. The darkness is around her, but it's not in her. And at that moment, I ran down to my study, and I just started writing until the sun came up. And when I finished, I stepped into the pulpit and said, we are called to dance in this darkness. Dance with love, with joy, with justice, with compassion, with dignity. And if we dance long enough, as Scripture says, joy does come in the morning.
So you talk about linking love and justice very early in the book. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting that in this civic moment that we don't link these two together, that love without justice is simply sentimentality. Justice without love becomes legalism and brutality. But when they're linked together, and I like to say when they walk down the aisle, they have two children, one child named Transformation and the other child named Liberation. And when that is central in our civic conversations and our personal conversations, it leads to transformation.
Wow. So the subtitle for spiritual lessons is Thriving in Turbulent Times, and a lot of those lessons draw upon the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. What parallels do you see between the turbulent times that he lived in and the ones that we're living in currently?
Well, Dr. King talks about what does it mean to have a complete life? Personal, the commitment that you must have, and the spiritual. And that's still true today. That if you want to have a, quote, complete life and create a new society, there has to be the personal dimension, there has to be the commitment to community, and then there has to be the spiritual dimension. And so Dr. King was dealing with a time period of chaos in American civic society, and then made the choice to say that we can build a ship in the midst of this chaos to move toward a beloved community. We're not there yet, but move toward a beloved community. And I believe that activists today are doing the same thing of building this ship, a ship that is rooted in this idea of justice, rooted in this idea of compassion and reciprocity and restoration versus retribution, which is very different.
And when you kind of talk about ways to address negativity, controversy, right, you draw upon a number of different faiths and traditions in your book, but you are a Christian preacher. So can you tell me why you kind of refer to other spiritualities or religions to kind of draw a point and bring these ideas together?
Well, the truth will set you free. And there's a truth that comes through in a variety of traditions. For example, I use the example of the Bembe tribe in South Africa. When a young person makes a transgression against the community, instead of casting them out, they create a circle of elders and of young people. And instead of saying, look what you did wrong, they say, let me tell you how much potential you have. let me tell you how powerful you are if you will live up to your potential. And they do that for hours, sometimes days and even weeks, until the young person breaks down and says, I have to live out the calling of my tradition. The Yoruba people in West Africa, they say that love, it has to have compassion, reciprocity, and respect. And it has to recognize that every person has the mark of the sacred upon it. And that all leads us back, as a person out of the Christian tradition, to these ideas that we have the mark of the sacred upon us.
But taking away the religious or spiritual standpoint, what is the message that you hope people will get from your book for those that aren't spiritual or religious?
Well, I think the idea of, again, merging love and justice together. The beautiful thing about Dr. King's work, the beautiful thing about Howard Thurman's work that I lift up in the book, is that it's particular and universal at the same time. Meaning that if I'm agnostic or if I am non-religious, I can embrace the idea of what should our nation look like? What are the values that I must live out? We must use the idea of love, of courage, of reciprocity, of compassion, of justice. No matter where you are from, those particular values are necessary for a human being to flourish.
Dr. Reverend Otis Moss, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was great.
Oh, thank you.
And again, the book is called Dancing in the Darkness, Spiritual Lessons for Thriving in Turbulent Times. You can read an excerpt on our website. And we are back with more Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, right after this. Back in the day here at Chicago Tonight, contributor Stan Lawrence hosted conversations that took a look back at the neighborhoods, businesses, and people who built Black Chicago. Now, in this 2005 throwback, Lawrence met with Michelle Hoskins, who turned a family recipe from the 1800s into a delicious story of success.
The honey cream syrup recipe started in the 1800s. My great-great-grandmother, and she was born a slave in Mississippi, and when they were emancipated in the 1860s, by 1866, she stayed on in the home that she was raised in as a cook at a very young age, like 13. And the family that she cooked for did not like molasses.
Really?
They did not like it, so they asked her to come up with something unique. And she came up with this honey cream recipe made out of honey, butter, and churned cream.
Really?
And she...
No molasses at all?
No molasses. They didn't like molasses. So she kept this recipe, and it was her own, and she passed it down to the third daughter in each generation.
America Washington's tradition was honored for 3 generations, and the honey cream syrup recipe stayed within the family. In the 1980s, Michelle Hoskins had an idea to develop a business that would sell the syrup to the public.
I had read that the 80s would be the decade of the woman. And what that meant was women were going to emerge as CEOs and executives of companies, and that they were going to really be recognized in the workforce. And so I said, I would like to be part of that movement.
Now, in addition to that honey cream flavor, Michelle Foods also makes butter pecan and maple cream syrups. You'll find those in grocery stores nationwide. Now, a group of Chicago artists are unifying their voice in a new collective geared toward strength in numbers. Meet the new Vanguard Coalition and their plans for creatives of color. There's strength in numbers. That's the premise of a new organization committed to uplifting Chicago creatives.
We believe that creatives of color are responsible for the popular dominant narrative in culture that we all benefit from. Right? And it's important that they're not viewed as a commodity, but rather centered and supported in the work.
Now, similar to their collective, the new Vanguard Coalition decided to showcase their artists in a space they feel also highlights the city's diversity, the Wonder Museum.
It's a dedicated space in Chicago with museums that are representing local Chicago artists. This is a first-of-a-kind experience for a lot of our artists, and so them being in this space not only signifies that they can do whatever they thought they couldn't do in their own studio, but also it's a dedicated space in Chicago.
Now, each artist of the coalition will take turns occupying a space within the museum to showcase their current work. For Nico Washington, it's the first time he's ever taken his ideas from a canvas to a physical installation.
So this series I've been doing has been over a 1.5-year span, stemming from my work and studio practice work with my paintings, relating to boxing and hand-eye coordination with discipline and self-discipline that I attribute to the martial arts and the boxing I did as a kid.
Washington's work examines how people of color can be portrayed in these spaces.
There's no better way to examine, I guess, the history of America than through a lens of sports, and especially boxing to me. To this, the fight of the century, to my right, every century there is a fight that is more than just boxing, that's more than just the sport. It's so much more culturally important for both parties or both fighters, or the moment in time, especially Muhammad Ali with Rumble in the Jungle, all the controversy that happened around that, him being banned, him being arrested, all of it just for him stand up for what he believed in, leading into Christ Muhammad. I think it's like a good juxtaposition between the athlete and, people who are Christians. But it's not just to Christians, it's anybody.
And as the new Vanguard Coalition and its artists work to create a more conversational space, Washington says he's grateful for the future conversations their work will facilitate.
And my life has always been either a part of a team or working with a team, and it's back to sports. It's a team game. Art should be a conversation. Whatever conversation that starts, whether that's a discourse, argument, happy, jubilated conversation, that's not, that's up for the viewer to decide.
You can see Battle Royale by Nico Washington at the Wonder Museum in the West Loop. And though the canvas is small, nail art has become a big part of personal and celebrity style. But Hyde Park's Takara Spifster-Sutton says credit is long overdue for nail artists like herself. Producer Erica Gunderson nails this spiffy story.
Coming to Spiff is to know that you kind of got to sit back and let me do what it is that I do. At the end of the day, you're here for the Spiffster experience.
When it came to making her way in the art world, Takara Spifster-Sutton started out small, like pinky nail small.
Well, do you find that this interaction kind of puts people at ease? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, completely. First thing I think is one thing that you do in your life where you're not doing anything with your hands. You're completely immobile. I'm holding your hands the entire time. How often are you this close to somebody talking to them? Yeah, it gets people open.
Today, Sutton's bold and bright nail art has helped her reach deep into the design world, where her art now graces apparel, home decor, and more. But back when she was a teenaged graphic design student, Sutton says she created her first designs on her own nails just to keep herself from biting them.
At that point, my design tool of choice was a Sharpie marker. I had maybe one polish that I had bought from Walgreens.
Soon, Sutton's friends were clamoring for her to spiff up their nails too, and her bespoke manicures were in high demand. She says that's when she realized her nail designs could grab attention just about anywhere.
I just knew that I wasn't going to be at those ad agencies just yet. So how am I going to get my stuff out there or whatever? So doing nails in that capacity, it was okay, I got friends that go to Columbia that are in these different spaces that I would like to be in. So it's if I can't be there, at least your nails can be there. So now the word is starting to circulate and a name is starting to be formed around it.
So how do you know when you're finished? Is it just a feeling?
It's a feeling, for sure. It is only a feeling that I can break. It's just whatever my soul wants to do.
15 years later, Sutton is a trendsetter in her own right, and she sees the hand of Black culture in nail design's emergence as an art form.
Black Girl Magic does have a very big influence on where nail artists today. I'm even seeing a lot of nail artists embracing nail jewels and stonework. And growing up, that was seen as something that was oh, that's gaudy. She's not going to get the job. And now you're seeing these women out here who are the head of companies that got stones on their nails.
These days, Sutton is turning her hand to growing her visual design practice through collaboration.
It's launched me into conversations that your average nail tech wouldn't have. Like, I got, CEOs and, of companies that are, consulting me about different design elements. I want to kind of embrace the season of collaboration. I know a lot of the best in what they do, and I'm the best of the best of what I do. So, hey, best of the best, let's make some better stuff.
And since she now only sees a select few clients in person, I felt very lucky to take home my own 10 tiny works of Spiffster's art.
Oh my God.
Get into it.
This is amazing. Like, this is literally better than I imagined.
Yes.
That's
the reaction we're looking for always.
How do you get that level? I'm sorry, I'm yelling. How do you get that level?
That's the whole Spiff experience. Like,
I get to take these home with me?
They are yours, right?
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
Wow, those are some spiffy nails. Now, Sutton offers press-on nails for some of her greatest hits. We've got those details on our website. And that's our show for this weekend. For all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Angelito. Thank you for sharing a part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.